Once upon a time, radioactive waste was buried here, the location of which remained unknown for a long time. The Kara Sea is often referred to as the Arctic nuclear graveyard. Thousands of containers with radioactive waste were sunk there during the Soviet era, and Soviet nuclear fleet ships lie at its bottom. The location of most of them was not known for a long time, because during the Cold War years everything connected with the Novaya Zemlya archipelago was surrounded by an atmosphere of strict secrecy. One of the first major studies of the objects located in these waters and their preservation was carried out by the expedition members on the vessel academic Mstislav Keldysh. What do the waters of the Kara Sea hide? Why has interest in it increased sharply recently, and which of the vessels on its bottom are considered the most dangerous? Radioactive waste. The problem of radioactive waste buried in the Arctic waters began to be actively discussed back in the 2010s. The practice became widespread internationally in the early 1950s, with the active development of the nuclear fleet and the growing interest in the use of atomic energy in general. In the 1970s, the London Convention prohibiting marine pollution, including radioactive waste, was adopted, but the damage, not only by the Soviet Union, but also, for example, by the United States, was sufficient. In 2014, experts at the Institute for the Problems of Nuclear Power Safety, IBRA, of the Russian Academy of Sciences noted that the Soviet Union and Russia accounted for a volume comparable to about half of all solid radioactive waste ever dumped in the world's oceans by other countries. Most of this, about 95%, is in the Kara Sea. Such a high concentration can be also explained by the fact that the Kara Sea is washed by the Novaya Zemlya archipelago, where the central nuclear testing ground had operated since 1954. In 1955 it carried out the first Soviet underwater nuclear explosion. Among other things, most of the tests took place in the early 1960s. In total, according to scientists, at the bottom in the western Arctic, there are 5 reactor compartments, including spent nuclear fuel, 19 ships with solid radioactive waste, 755 structures and blocks of nuclear power plants, contaminated with radioactive substances not protected by hermetic packaging, and about 17,000 containers with such waste. This information was also confirmed by the head of the expedition, Deputy Director of the Shirshov Institute of Oceanology of the Russian Academy of Sciences Mikhail Flint. PP Shirshov Institute of Oceanology of the Russian Academy of Sciences Mikhail Flint. There are hundreds of containers lying there. When you look at the pictures shown by the side scan locator, these are just placers of containers, he noted, telling TASS about the results of the expedition. Although some of the sunken objects in the Kara Sea were periodically examined, the main difficulty was the lack of systematic and accurate information about the location of most of them. Under the conditions of the Cold War, almost everything that happened in the area of the Novaya Zemlya archipelago was strictly classified. By the beginning of this century, such obscurity had turned the waters of the Kara Sea, especially in the vicinity of Novaya Zemlya, into a kind of atomic minefield. Unfortunately, the exact location of all dumped objects has not been established. Russian radiation scavenger ship to appear in the Arctic. The new dry cargo carrier will be able to take out spent reactors of nuclear submarines and deliver cargo to the military. The demise of the Nagasaki. However, it is known for sure where one of the most dangerous, according to scientists and representatives of nature preservation organizations, is situated in Kara Sea. In 1968, a radiation accident occurred aboard the nuclear submarine K-27, the only Project 645 ship built that used liquid metal as a coolant. The submarine, also known as Nagasaki, was at the time navigating in the Barents Sea. It was successfully driven back to port, but all 144 crew members on board received serious radiation doses, killing 9 people. The service is tightening the criteria for the safe decommissioning of nuclear facilities and waste storage sites. Afterwards, the submarine spent almost a decade moored in a closed port in the Murmansk region. Eventually, it was decided not to do any reconstruction work, and in 1980 the submarine was sunk in the Kara Sea, in a narrow strait near Stepovoy Peninsula, off the coast of Novaya Zemlya. The nuclear reactor was then covered with a special preservative. Over the past decade, the boat has been studied repeatedly, but there is no consensus on how effective this measure was. In 2012, for example, specialists from 3 expeditions worked in this area at once. The scientists found neither radiation leaks nor any damage to the hull, but already at that time they first began discussing the question of lifting it to the surface. In 2014, the Deputy General Designer of Concern Morinformsystemaget JSC and one of the leading specialists in radioactive waste disposal said that, in his opinion, the boat is very well preserved. There is no activity, no environmental contamination, but given the shallow depth of 33 meters, it is reasonable to plan to raise it. In 2015, a publication on the website of the environmental organization Bologna noted that the preservative poured into the reactor may not have been reliable enough. In the mid-2010s, the K-27 is hardly the most dangerous of the underwater facilities. Among other things, because of its shallow depth. The nuclear submarine K-159 prepared to be towed to its disposal site. Water getting inside the reactor can cause an uncontrolled chain reaction. 5 to 6 liters of water inside is enough to increase the criticality of the situation. Another potentially hazardous object is another submarine, the K-159. Unlike the Nagasaki, it sank accidentally during towing for scrapping, and its reactor was not mothballed. In addition, the hull of the submarine currently lies in an area of busy shipping traffic. With the possible exception of K-27, most of the objects with radioactive materials are located in the area of the so-called Novaya Zemlya Trench, a depression extending along the eastern coast of the Novaya Zemlya archipelago. Earlier it was assumed that the depth difference, from 400 meters to about 50 meters in the shallow water surrounding the depression, is a natural buffer, which separates the burial zone of the objects from the main water area of the Kara Sea. However, this is not true. A number of independent data showed that the bay water area, including the most central part, actively communicates with the water area of the adjacent Kara Sea. Such studies to determine how actively the waters of the depression communicate with the rest of the Kara Sea, according to representatives of the expedition, were carried out for the first time. But the main thing is that scientists managed to map most of the known buried objects with SRW in this part of the Kara Sea, and localize the area where several hundred containers with radioactive waste are located. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends. Give it a thumbs up. Write in the comments about what else interesting you can tell about this video. See you in the new video.